This podcast is brought to you by Three Rivers Energy Partners. In today's episode of Digest This, the net zero framework is a pretty ambitious attempt to steer the whole shipping sector toward net zero emissions.
Some folks say, it's going to level the playing field, but others warn it could create fragmentation.
They wrapped up early and hit pause on the actual adoption of the framework for an entire year. Welcome to Digest This, Unpacking Our Sustainable Future, where we dive deep into the latest developments in sustainability and renewable energy. Join us in exploring the pioneering solutions and technologies that are shaping our future. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Digest This, Unpacking Our Sustainable Future. It's Alex here with my fellow navigator through the sustainability seas, Emily. Emily, we're talking ships like big ships today.
That's right, Alex. We're zooming out, way out to the global shipping lanes. The International Maritime Organization, the IMO, is really the only body with power to set the rules for how ships across the world operate, especially when it comes to emissions. They're basically the referee for international shipping.
Yeah, and I know IMO isn't exactly a table conversation for most folks, but they play a massive role behind the scenes, right? I mean, if you care about global emissions, and listeners, if you're back from episode 5 when we talked about bio-LNG and those crazy carbon reduction potentials, shipping really matters. Something like 80 or 90% of goods traded global. Wait, is it 80 or? I always mess this up. Let's go with the lion's share anyway, gets shipped by sea. Their environmental impact is gigantic.
So this summer, the IMO made headlines again with the approval of what's called the Net Zero Framework. This is essentially a huge slate of regs aimed at slashing greenhouse gas emissions from shipping. If you're a policy nerd like me, the main takeaway is a new Chapter 5 in MARPOL Annex 6. Okay, that's already too much jargon, sorry.
No, I think it's worth pausing there. MARPOL is like the global treaty that deals with pollution from ships. Annex 6 is just the bit about air pollution. So, new chapter, new rules, new responsibilities. This move is supposed to line up with the IMO's broader GHG reduction goals they set back in the 2023 strategy, if you remember those headlines.
Exactly. The Net Zero Framework is a pretty ambitious attempt to steer the whole shipping sector toward net zero emissions, eventually. And it brings two really major things to the table: a global fuel standard and a worldwide carbon pricing mechanism for ships. That's an unprecedented move for a sector that honestly has flown under the regulatory radar for decades.
It's like we talk so much about renewable tech on land, but the ocean's still the Wild West. Well, at least until now. The new framework is intended to pull shipping in line with the rest of the global climate action push. But, and there's always a but, it's not all smooth sailing yet.
Yeah, so what's happening right now? The latest development is honestly a bit anticlimactic. After all this momentum, the Marine Environment Protection Committee, the MEPC, which is the part of the IMO handling this, they just adjourned. Which, in plain English, means they wrapped up early and hit pause on the actual adoption of the framework for an entire year.
Right. They were supposed to rubber stamp, or at least move forward with, the new amendments to MARPOL, but now, instead, it's, let's all go back and talk some more. I think the session lasted about 4 days, and then, boom, see you in a year. You get these classic international conference moments, right?
Shipping's so global, getting consensus is tricky. There's a wide spectrum of interests. Think small island nations desperate for climate action versus major shipping nations worried about costs and competitiveness. So the adjournment basically says we're not there yet.
But it's not a full stop, right? Like, the whole process doesn't just freeze. There's this intersessional working group meeting happening. I believe that's going to keep hammering out the nuts and bolts. That group's focusing on writing the guidelines, basically getting into the how of implementing the framework when or if it's actually adopted next year.
Exactly. And that's where the real work happens, behind closed doors, hashing out the fine print. I mean, you need standards detailed enough that companies know what's coming, but flexible enough to keep all these different countries at the table. If you remember our earlier episodes, especially when we talked about how sometimes the pace of these frameworks is glacial, this is a classic case.
Yeah, and honestly, having watched efforts stall out over details, like how you measure life cycle emissions, who gets the credits, does RNG count as green if it's shipped from the US to Asia, that kind of thing, I'd rather they take the time to get it right. But still, a 1-year delay is not nothing. The climate clock's ticking.
One bright spot. At least with the working group meeting soon, we might actually see some draft guidelines start to take shape. Until then, a lot of folks in the industry, and honestly, in the renewable energy world more broadly, are in wait-and-see mode. You can feel the anticipation, but also a bit of frustration because so much hinges on these outcomes.
All right, let's dig into those two pillars you mentioned earlier: global fuel standards and carbon pricing for shipping. I mean, fuel standards sounds simple, but in practice, it's a maze. The big question: what makes a fuel compliant? Like, can you use advanced biofuels or RNG or just lower sulfur diesel or...
That's such a good point. A truly global fuel standard for ships could be transformative. If the IMO sets, say, a cap on carbon intensity per megajoule delivered, suddenly you've got a clear, enforceable metric. But defining and measuring that carbon intensity isn't trivial. You'd have to consider full life cycle impacts. It's complicated.
And then there's the whole issue of infrastructure. Say the standard promotes RNG or hydrogen? Great. But do ports around the world have the capability to supply that fuel? If you listen to our past RNG episodes, you know putting clean gas into the pipeline doesn't magically make it available at every harbor. Infrastructure investments are important here.
Definitely. And the carbon pricing side could be, frankly, even more disruptive. If you put a price on greenhouse gas emissions from ships, that's going to impact every shipping company's bottom line, and it could shift the dial on which fuels make sense to invest in. Suddenly, renewables might look way more attractive compared to heavy fuel oil, just from a straight-up economics perspective.
But you know, global carbon pricing is, well, it's never easy. Who collects the money? How's it redistributed? Can smaller economies handle the extra costs? There's always the risk of ships just reflagging or oceans of complex loopholes. Some folks say, oh, it's going to level the playing field, but others warn it could create fragmentation. I might be a little cynical from past policy battles, but history shows hiccups are pretty much guaranteed.
And just to reference a recent episode, remember when we discussed how book and claim systems are needed to actually track which ship is using what kind of fuel? That's, I think, going to be a bigger and bigger part of this discussion. These standards will need robust accounting mechanisms, or companies might just game the system. Transparency is going to be key.
The upside, if it works, this could drive a whole wave of innovation. We could see way more clean fuel projects, more investment in energy efficiency, and a big boost for technologies like RNG or green hydrogen. It's not just about rules, it's about creating new opportunities. But the devil's very much in the details.
Exactly. There's a huge opportunity here for the shipping industry to genuinely lead on climate in a way other sectors just haven't had to yet. But how it plays out, well, let's just say, we'll be right back here when the working group finishes up, breaking it all down for you.
All right, I think that's a good place to leave it for now. We'll be tracking the IMO's progress, and maybe, just maybe, we'll see some concrete agreements next year. Emily, thanks for nerding out with me today on, honestly, one of the most complicated but crucial pieces of the energy puzzle.
Always a pleasure, Alex, and thanks everyone for listening to Digest This. Stay tuned. There's a lot more to uncover as the story unfolds. See you next time.
See you all soon. Take care. Thank you for listening to Digest This, Unpacking Our Sustainable Future, a Three Rivers Energy Partners podcast. Three Rivers Energy Partners is a renewable energy company that empowers organizations with the ability to create a sustainable future by converting organic waste streams into renewable energy and resources. To get the latest episode of Digest This, or to find out more about Three Rivers Energy Partners, visit threeriversenergy.com or find us on LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. The sustainable future is being created right now. Keep exploring and keep up to speed with the latest in renewable energy and sustainability. See you next time.